There's only one way to be truly happy, and sadly, you've probably never heard of it, not even a little bit. But before we get there, let's look at the common misconceptions about happiness and how they lead countless people astray. To help with that, let's take an imaginary buddy named Bob and trace his pursuit of happiness, starting from birth. Bob's career of seeking happiness starts immediately upon birth, even though at first he's not aware of it. As soon as he pops out, some things feel bad and some things feel good, and Bob pursues the comfortable and flees the uncomfortable. At first, it's all automatic, but as he gets a little bit older, he becomes more able to consciously think about what feels good and what doesn't. And he eventually learns the vital skill of delaying immediate gratifications in order to win bigger prizes. As he gets even older, he learns more important lessons, such as learning the power of hard work, sacrificing smaller desires in order to achieve larger goals, the importance of cooperating and playing nicely with others, and how much better it feels to win rather than to lose, how much better it feels to be at the top rather than the bottom. And so Bob, since he's not stupid or incapable, does what it takes in order to win more than he loses as much as possible. As Bob approaches adulthood and independence, he sticks to that same approach. He has in mind an ideal informed by the expectations of his parents, of society, of his peers, of what success would look like. And credit to him, he moves towards that ideal. He goes to college and works hard, the aim always being to keep moving towards wealth, respectability, professional and personal success. Bob graduates and gets his first entry-level job. Now, he's not the happiest camper, since the commutes are long, the hours are long, the pay is low, the work is boring, and his place in the pecking order is low. But he lives on hope. He sees the big dogs bussing around, sees them pulling up in nice cars, and so on, and dreams of the days when all of that will be his. Right now, I'm not much, he feels. But when I succeed, I will be a made man. My anxiety, stress, emptiness, insignificance, inferiority, boredom will go away, and I will be whole and happy. And so Bob plugs away day after day. And soon enough, he's the big dog at work. Everything is great, but now that he's no longer living on hope, dreaming about a better future, but is more or less in that future, little questions begin to pop up here and there as to whether this is enough and whether he is happy enough. Something is missing, he figures. It's that I'm not married. If I was married, life would be truly perfect. So Bob begins to ramp things up with the girl, let's call her Bella, that he has been seeing for a few years now. Soon enough, he gets down on one knee and pops the question. Bella says yes. Bob is thrilled, and the next few months are some of his happiest as he plans and anticipates the big day. Bob and Bella get married outdoors on a beautiful day without any major hiccups and move in together. It takes a few months of excitement and novelty, but soon enough, Bob is back to baseline. Life is life, but now it's shared with the wife. A few years go by. He can't say that he is, per se, happy, but he always has something to look forward to. Weekend plans with Bella, seeing family, holiday gatherings, and so on. So he gets by. Still, this can't be it, he catches himself thinking sometimes. Luckily enough for him, before these thoughts get too deep, Bella has a big announcement, and we can guess what it is. Bob is again overjoyed. That's what he has been missing in his life, he realizes. And when his kid is born, he will be, finally, happy, whole, and complete. Fast forwarding through many days and details, the first time life again slows down for Bob and he really stops to think of his happiness is when Bob's baby has turned into a teen and has his own life. Yes, Bob is still in dad mode, at least some of the time, but increasingly he has more time on his hands to think about life. And his thoughts go something like this. My life is pretty much perfect. I have a great career. I'm earning more than most. I live in a beautiful home. I'm married more or less happily. I have a child who I love. Yet still, this can't be it. Still, I don't feel truly whole and at peace. There's got to be so much more to life. It's got to be my career, right? I am earning a lot, but I'm still working for someone, and that puts limits on my professional growth. Maybe it's my wife too. She does take great care of herself, but being around her is kind of boring. She nags for no reason, and the last time we. So, as Bob's kid leaves for college, he makes some major changes in his life. He starts his own firm. He parts ways with Bella, nicely, of course, upgrades his wardrobe, splurges on watches and a new self driving car. He dials in his fitness and nutrition, swimming, lifting, or playing pickleball at least 5 days a week. Gets on TRT, starts each day with a guided meditation session and cold plunge, tracks his macros, takes supplements for anti aging, never misses his daily step count. And since he read studies suggesting that strong relationships are key to longevity and well being, he makes sure to have at least one social outing a week. And that's on top of his regular donations to several different charities, supporting the orphans, kids with cancer, and more, in order to get the benefits of being a giver. Bob's days are again busy. He looks forward to bigger and bigger wins, and he gets them. Soon, he's making more than he ever has. In order to avoid boredom and stagnation and the unpleasant feeling of emptiness after having reached a milestone, Bob gets into the habit of setting the bar higher as soon as he sees himself so much as approaching his earning goals in the distance. It's not about the destination, he reminds himself. It's about the journey. One win to the next is the motto. Still, however, with all that said and done, Bob, at least when the business calms down, such as in the evenings or on weekends, feels unsatisfied. Is there something wrong with me? Why am I still not totally content and happy? He sometimes thinks. He watches videos and reads books about happiness. Maybe he's been missing the mental/emotional side of the game, he thinks. So he steps up his meditation. He gets into mindfulness. He listens to exotic looking people that tell him he's one with the universe and to destroy his ego. He tries to calm his racing thoughts. He sees a therapist and opens up about his childhood. He keeps a gratitude journal. He cuts down on phone use. He gets into nature. He listens to music. He practices living in the moment and being present. He gets a dog. He buys more cars. He starts several new hobbies. He keeps his dating calendar booked. He dabbles with politics, which brings some excitement. He books trips every few months and even tries some funny tasting plants, which take him for a loop. And yet, for all that, Bob is still unsatisfied. At this point, he begins to put his hope in his grandchildren. He looks forward when his boy will finally get married himself and make him a grandpa. Then, sitting by the fire with my grandkids on my lap, life will be complete. He sometimes daydreams. Retirement also begins to sound good to him. Maybe it's all this business and hustle culture that's stealing my peace and happiness. Give it another 10 years, and I'll be on the golf course all day, somewhere nice and warm. That'll do it. And so Bob soldiers on. We've been on Bob way too long now and need to bring his story to a close. Bob does get his grandkids, and he does retire, and he does spend all day on the golf course. But as we might be guessing at this point, none of that ultimately does it for him. Maybe it's because I left my wife, he sometimes thinks at night when he can't fall asleep. She was a sweet lady. Actually, come to think of it, the reason for my discontent is obvious. Look at the bozos who are in control of this country. Look at the economy and the geopolitical situation. Who could be happy in times like these? And on top of that, my grandkids hardly even visit me. And my son is only interested in what inheritance I'll leave for him, it seems. And so Bob continues in this occasional bafflement for another 10 years or so, until one quiet summer evening, he goes to sleep and does not wake up. His son, grandkids, some surviving friends and golf buddies, and even his ex-wife and a few recent lady friends are in attendance as Bob gets buried. Some of them shed a few tears as the eulogy is read. Others are there just out of politeness. The casket is lowered. They go to the luncheon at the Reserve restaurant, sharing a few stories about Bob, but mostly talking about work, school, and politics. And then, since it's a weekday, wrap up around noon, some going back to work, others to class, and others to the golf course. And that, as it concerns our buddy Bob, is that. Whew, that was a long story. What can we learn from it? The first thing to say is that even though the combination of details is fictional, Bob's story, in its essence, represents that of billions of people in one form or another. Indeed, of altogether all people who do not figure out what it takes to be truly happy. The details differ, but the gist of the story always remains the same. And what is that gist? We can start with the fact that we seem wired when we're standing at the bottom of a hill, so to speak, such as at the start of some hoped for future involving success, money, and so on, to feel that, however inadequate now I feel, once I climb to the top of the hill, everything will be great. Once I earn enough, get promoted enough, am successful enough, change my looks enough, I will be totally happy, content, and peaceful. That's certainly how Bob felt. Now, the issue is certainly not the climbing. It is certainly not preferable to be lazy and unambitious, standing on the sidelines and being jealous of people in the arena trying to make it in life. The question of happiness is not that simple. The issue, rather, is that once we climb to the top of some hill, getting some success, some money, or whatever else that we were after, we find, along with every other person that has ever lived, that real, lasting happiness, peace, satisfaction is still missing. And instead of, at that point, pausing to reevaluate our basic approach to life, most often we just blame someone or something for our unhappiness and lack of satisfaction and immediately look for another hill to climb in hopes of finding that pot of gold, meaning lasting happiness there. Bob, for example, continued doing that his whole life, striving to accomplish something. And then, when he still felt empty and unfulfilled, assumed that it was because of XYZ reason, like his wife or the fact that he didn't own his own business, and got busy pursuing the next goal without any real reflection. Let's imagine that he did pause to reflect. What might have he figured out then? He might have figured out that what he was really after could never and would never be found by simply climbing another hill, making some life changes, and getting busy again, by trying to earn more, by moving into a bigger house, or anything else like that. And he might have as well figured out that what he was really after wasn't just some nice feeling, but was some sort of highest good, some sort of infinite, endless good, a kind of safety, security, peace, power, gratification, contentment, freedom, existence, and reality that knows no bounds and has no end. Next, Bob could have figured out that, despite all his different attempts at getting that good, looking for it in his job, in his family, in his health habits, and so on, he had absolutely no idea how to find it. All that he ever actually found were brief feelings of good, like feelings of success, feelings of security, comfort, and so on, but nothing more than that. And once the feelings were gone, he was back to his essentially empty shelf. So what are we to do? Is the answer depression, pessimism, nihilism? A better option would be to ask, what is at the root of those feelings? How come if a person wakes up and realizes more success won't make them truly and permanently happy, they might well fall into depression? There's two primary reasons. One is that we realize that the claims of our self-centered, selfish nature will never be permanently satisfied. We will never have enough money, success, pleasure to give us the infinite, endless good that we are after. And two is that we refuse to give up that self-centered, selfish nature. We refuse to, so to speak, sign the release form on selfish life, to wave away the me and the my life, the claim of this little creature that we are, here today, gone tomorrow, to be the be-all, end-all, the true center of the universe, the idol in service of which everything and everyone else exists. It is just that refusal that makes us doomed and makes true happiness impossible. And it would be just the opposite, meaning something like self-surrender and consent to give up that essentially self-centered, selfish life that could ever actually help me and could ever lead me to true happiness. But there's a couple key details that have to be added at this point, without which self-sacrifice might make us even more doomed. The first is, what exactly do we surrender to? We say that the impulse for self-surrender is common enough. People give themselves away all the time to romantic partners, to the chase after success, to political causes, to passions, pleasures, drugs, cults, ideologies, even to the point of being willing to die for the cause, the cult, the drug, etc. People like this, obviously, are not only not better off than those who refuse self-sacrifice, but are much worse off. So what does all this kind of supposed self-surrender have in common that makes it at least ineffective for true happiness, and at worst destructive and disgusting? It is that I, in these cases, am not truly giving up my self-centeredness, my self-worship, but I am simply finding some projection or extension of my self-centeredness to satisfy my psychological desire for self-surrender. For example, I might find a pet cause that I like, that makes me feel special and righteous and important, and then I can melt away for it. I might find a romantic partner that's obsessed over me and makes me feel like the center of the universe, and then give my heart totally away to this partner. That is all fake self-surrender, since in exchange I get the ultimate ego boost, and it will never bring me true and lasting happiness. So once more, what then do we surrender ourselves to? Remember that what we are after is not some small good, like some candy, which is easy enough to get, but the highest good. Not a good that has an end, such as a day at the amusement park, but an endless good. And so it makes sense that what we need to surrender ourselves to is not either a small good, but the highest good. A small good is something that has little reality in existence, while the highest good is something that has the ultimate reality in existence. So if we want the highest good, then we need to seek for sacrificial union with and surrender to ultimate reality in existence. We need to release the tightly clenched fist of me and my life, not to another person, to the political cause, to the drug, but only to ultimate reality in existence. Anything short of that won't really do. And only in that union, in that surrender, is our true good, our highest and most lasting happiness to be found. But even that's not the whole story, because the next obvious question to ask is where and what is this reality? Can we see it somewhere with binoculars? Is it nature or the universe or what? One obvious approach is to say what it is not. It is not nature or the universe, nor any particular thing. Since if anything is particular, it is not ultimate and singular. So what we need to sacrifice our life and our will and ourselves to is something other than anything particular, other than this, that, and the other. If there's any alternative to it, if it's one out of many, it ain't it. But another approach is to point out that as a matter of psychological fact. Some people feel like they have a seed of it in themselves, and some people feel like they do not. Some people naturally find the prospect of one day not living for themselves, for their selfishness, appealing, while others feel that they would rather die than give up a hair of themselves. When some people hear about the idea that there must be some sort of ultimate good in reality that has an absolute claim on one's love, loyalty, and life, they like the sound of it, even if so far it's all theoretical, and even if self-centeredness is still supreme in their life. Others either do not understand at all what that could mean, or if they do, they hate the sound of it, understanding unconsciously that that claim is the ultimate threat to self-centeredness, to a life of self-worship with all its vice, greed, addiction, hatred, conflict with others, and so on. That's to say that any advice about the possibilities of true happiness depend on whether or not a given person has any pull towards goodness or not, and to what extent. And that is assuming, of course, that first of all, in question is psychologically a person with enough psychosocial development and integration to where this can even be a serious discussion. Let's imagine first that Bob fell into the first group. Let's say he naturally did have a positive response to the prospect of a fundamental reorientation away from self-centeredness, to signing that, so to speak, release form on that attitude of, it's all about me and what I want, suggestive of having some seed of true goodness and reality inside. In that case, his path to true happiness would lie in, metaphorically speaking, growing that seed into a full tree, running his race to the end, and morally maturing as much as possible, solidifying himself in virtue and goodness. Because the fact is that a seed is just a seed. An acorn is not enough to have an oak tree, and the potential to be a truly good person is not enough to actually become one. Even if Bob had the potential, he still could have been sidetracked by a million different side quests. Money or success or his career could still have taken over his life, and there are certainly countless cases of people that have or had, to again use a metaphor, the little spark of self-surrender inside that could have turned into a great fire of real individuality, of real goodness, of real love, but did get sidetracked and never really matured and made anything of themselves as human beings. And that, of course, is not a recipe for true happiness. So, what he would need to have done, concretely speaking, is through living life a certain way, with a certain overall intent, becoming in reality who he was in potential, through things like discipline, devotion, service, working on character, studying quality, ethical literature, and applying the insights to his life, he could have become a real individual and human being. The start of which is always taking that stand against one's selfishness and self-centeredness. In this case, everything that he did externally would go to his true benefit. His work, his health habits, even having fun would have been a form of service, a way to grow in goodness, character, self-forgetfulness, and love. And if he did that, truth be told, by the time Bob was an old fellow, or maybe even long before then, there would have been no more Bob in the sense that there was at first, meaning in the sense of a needy, inadequate ball of pride, desires, emotions. Bob would have been, so to speak, saved from himself in that more superficial sense. He would no longer have been just a spot of selfishness with stunted and warped mental, moral, emotional capacities, but someone with a sense of true life, existence, peace, with real powers of mind, real freedom, and real love. All of this is possible and expected per individual capacity for those who have a seed of self-surrender and then live a life where that seed can grow, allowing themselves to be formed and molded by the demands of truth, goodness, love, making the needed sacrifices each step of the way and bearing all burdens and challenges without losing hope. In other words, in this case, Bob would have attained his true happiness, or rather, the true version of it that he could not even imagine beforehand. But now for the scary question. What if Bob had no such seed or spark? What if he had absolutely no desire for or interest in surrendering his essentially self-centered orientation, of signing my life and my will and my desires away? You can't start a fire without a flame, no matter how much wood you place in the fireplace. And without some little love of goodness, some little willingness to give oneself up, no amount of doing stuff, learning stuff, self-improvement, therapy, mind-altering substances, or anything else can ever really, truly help me and lead me to true and lasting happiness. It would all be like throwing wood into a fireplace without a flame to light it. So, if Bob was this kind of person, what should he have done? In this case, it wouldn't be about him doing anything per se. For example, panicking and giving lots of money to charity, even though that could be nice for its own sake. But to recognize, to become aware of his condition. If Bob was this kind of person, then the very last place he'd think to check to account for his lack of happiness and his emptiness would be, so to say, the condition of his heart. Before ever doing that, Bob was likely to blame literally anything else. I'm not getting paid enough. I don't live in a big enough house. My wife is annoying. My grandkids don't visit enough. The government is bad. And we're lucky, on that note, that people like Bob, who are success-oriented, when they feel empty and sad, mostly search for socially approved solutions, like trying to earn more money, trying to become more successful, or booking a vacation. There's many people a bit less, say, socialized, that in those times turn to all kinds of destructive and antisocial activity. Even murder and suicide, or both, tragically, might be turned to long before any kind of self-awareness. So what would then be the move for Bob would be for someone to explain to him that his fundamental problem was not him, her, this, that, and the other, society, salary, or anything else, but was nothing short of that he had a fundamentally flawed relationship with life and existence and reality, that he had no desire whatsoever to surrender his self-centeredness and selfishness, no inkling of real goodness, which would be the capacity and potential to so do, and maybe even through no fault of his own. That's just how he was, perhaps. But once it was explained to him, it would be on him to acknowledge it, and not to hide behind fake righteousness, such as saying, oh, no, no, no. Don't you know how much I give to charity, how kindly I treat my employees, how many petitions for world peace I've signed, or anything like that. If then he did become aware of and acknowledged the bad condition of his heart, little something called humility might have sprung up in him, and that humility would have been his only chance at the change needed for true happiness. Realistically speaking, however, that humility would most likely not have been enough. Bob would likely have needed to suffer a great deal. He may have had to fall ill and become terrified of death, or lose all his money, or be abandoned by his kid and grandkids, for his hard heart to have softened up, for his shell of pride and self-sufficiency to be cracked open even a little bit and lead to fuller self-surrender, which is the first step to true happiness. Without that awareness and humbling, no amount of suffering would help, but with it, maybe he'd have had a little chance. Let's now review and bring things to a close. As a human being, from my first moments, I seek for self-satisfaction. I want experience to be adequate, if not outstanding. As a little kid, I want to have endless fun and good times, and the same continues when I grow up. The natural impulse is to believe that when I get all my ducks in a row, when I climb up this or that hill, I will be perfectly content, at peace, and satisfied. The first time, however, that I do climb up a hill and find that that perfect peace, contentment, and so on escapes me, I have the opportunity to reevaluate my basic approach to life, which is normally one of pursuing self-centered self-satisfaction. Where is my money, my success, my happiness, and so on? However, the only approach that can ever actually lead me to true happiness is where, having first become psychologically a real person, which means not running from the challenges and opportunities that life presents to me, trying to succeed and engaging fully when life is needed, I, so to speak, waive my rights to my own life. I surrender myself, and not in hopes of future benefit, but out of some seed of impersonal nobility or goodness or love, for what is higher than self. Should I have any such seed? And most importantly, I surrender myself not to anything particular, such as another person or other extension of my egoism, but to my best sense of the highest good, or the absolute reality. If I have any such innate goodness to me, I want to structure my life so as to deepen and strengthen it, and till my last day, keep maturing and growing in goodness and real individuality, which comes only at the expense and death of self-worship, self-centeredness, self-deceit, and can be done through anything that I do in my life, such as work, family life, study, service, and so on. If I have no such desire on any level for real self-surrender, and or I'm only willing to sacrifice myself to some or another extension of self, such as a cause, a cult, money, pleasure, power, etc., then real happiness is for me, thus far, an impossibility. But by becoming aware of that, and by really making it click how screwed I now am, how my whole existence is offensive to reality, then maybe, especially after much suffering and pain, I might ease my clenched fist of me and my life in the negative sense, renounce my self-idolatry, wherein I try to be above others, and I might take a proper place as a member of the human race, one among equals, a part alongside other parts, the center of whose life is not self, but reality both infinitely above each, and yet in some unfathomable way, not alien to each either. And so at the end of the day, we find that true happiness is not a trick, a technique, or scheme. It results from, or is prohibited by, the free, uncoerced response of the whole self of each to the fundamental ethical demand made on each rational, sentient human being. That being to having first developed the self, to give it away, to surrender it, to seize one's essential alienation from reality and from all others. And that then is the only way to be truly happy. Thank you for listening.